Hello audio geeks and welcome back to the channel. Now many of you will have a special place in your heart for digital audio players or DAPs, DAPs. And for many years iPods in particular were the coolest and most desirable gadgets, and Apple sold what, a gazillion of them. They finally killed off the venerable iPod line earlier this year. Since those halcyon days, the rise of smartphones coupled with the popularity of streaming services has meant that DAPs are now seen as niche products amongst audiophiles. But you can still buy DAPs in 2022, some of which can cost quite a lot more than even high-end phones. But the question is, why would you bother with a DAP in 2022? Now today I'm going to be talking about some of the reasons that many audiophiles still enjoy the experience of using a DAP, and also I'll be looking at some of the potential downsides. So the first most important reason that audiophiles love DAPs is that they sound simply fantastic, especially in comparison to phones. So here I have my Fiio M11 Plus ESS, which is a modern DAC, and it's the latest version of the M11 line. And here I have my Sony Xperia 5 Mark III, which is a popular phone amongst audiophiles, particularly by virtue of the fact that it has a headphone jack and an expandable microSD card slot. Now the M11, this one, it just sounds so much better than the 5 Mark III when they're both playing exactly the same music file. There's so much more detail and resolution, much clearer instrument separation, a more convincing soundstage and better dynamics. Imaging is much more precise and leads to a more 3D feel to the track. Now the 5 Mark III is not bad at all, and it still delivers a balanced and neutral performance, but the M11 Plus is, shall we say, next level when it comes to a portable audio source. Now you won't notice a difference so much if you're listening to highly compressed modern day pop music, but fire up a really well recorded track like the old chestnut Daft Punk's Motherboard, for example, and you will definitely notice a difference in clarity pretty much straight away. But why does the M11 sound so much better? Well, really it hinges on the fact that this is a uni-purpose device where every component is chosen and the circuitry designed for audio fidelity, whereas the phone here has to do a whole load of things really well. Making phone calls, although people don't really do that nowadays, do they? Camera processing, all that kind of stuff. So in the M11 Plus we get a dedicated digital to analog converter, or DAC. In fact, we get a pair of them. In the case of the M11 Plus ESS, they are a pair of Sabre ESS DACs. Now in the phone, the DAC duties are performed by the non-specialized Qualcomm Snapdragon chip. In the Fiio, we also get a special output stage featuring THX certified amps, feeding the balanced 4.4mm, 2.5mm or the single-ended 3.5mm jack. So this also means that although the Sony phone can drive most IEMs pretty well, it struggles with more power-hungry, high-impedance over-ear headphones. The Fiio has 3 different output gain levels which you can select, and as well as being able to power all of my IEMs, it does pretty well powering my 300 ohm Sennheiser HD650s with some juice to spare. So let's talk about offline storage next, and ignore the Xperia here for a minute because that actually has an SD card slot, but most modern flagship smartphones have done away with expandable storage, and so you are stuck with the base level storage that's built into the device. Now this is fine if you predominantly use streaming services, but if you're old school like me and you have a huge digital music collection that you want to carry around with you, you are out of luck. Now most DAPs feature support for large capacity SD card, micro SD cards, and the M11 Plus has 1 slot. Some DAPs have more than 1 slot. So you can absolutely stuff these micro SD cards full of high quality FLAC files, and SD cards and micro SD cards are generally pretty cheap. Now getting music onto these cards is also really easy. You can usually drag and drop via just the File Explorer interface, using the player plugged in via USB-C, or you could even use a microSD card reader. Either way, dead easy, drag and drop, no special software needed. iPhones in particular are a nuisance to load up with files. The Lightning connection only supports USB 2 speeds, and if you're on Windows, you actually have to use iTunes. I've mentioned that in a previous video. You've got to use iTunes, and it's really clunky. So it doesn't compare favorably at all with just being able to drag loads of files onto an SD card. Now, the next point is a slightly geeky one, and that is the ability to bypass the Android sample rate conversion process. So for those of you that aren't aware, most music apps on Android phones output their audio through the core Android audio system, which resamples the music to 48 kilohertz, regardless of what the original sample rate was. Why is this a problem, you might ask? Well, because on some phones, including sadly my high-end Sony here, it results in the generation of digital noise artifacts, which you can hear during quiet passages of music. As I say, the Xperia is guilty of this particular crime. So if you try and listen to Dark Side of the Moon via Tidal or Spotify, you'll hear a load of digital crackling before the heartbeats become audible. Now, this resampling noise also ruins quiet passages of classical music. You can get around this to some extent by using and installing an app which can bypass the resampling system, and the most well-known one is UAPP on Android phones. I've spoken about that before. I might do a dedicated video on it, but there are other programs such as Neutron Music Player, Hi-B Music Player as well, I believe, which can bypass the sample rate conversion. But there are limitations. So for example, you can't play Spotify through UAPP, nor can you download offline Tidal files on UAPP. So if you want to listen to Tidal offline, then you're stuck using the native app, and then you get those horrible noise artifacts. Now, most modern Android-based DAPs, such as the Fiio M11 Plus here, now they can all bypass the SRC entirely, regardless of which application you're using. So you get no nasty digital gremlins there. You just get lovely, pure, bit-perfect output for both offline and streaming services. Now, the M11 Plus here has a little indicator in the notification panel which tells you what the sample rate of the track that's playing is, and it even decodes MQA files. If that's your thing, it's not really my thing. As long as my DAP can play CD quality files bit perfectly, then I'm really happy. So let's talk about streaming music next, and most modern DAPs do allow you to install all the popular streaming services either directly through the Google Play Store, such as the M11 Plus, which comes preloaded with the Google Play Store, or by sideloading Android APK packages. You can do that on, for example, a Shanling M3X. You can do it on some Estelle and Kern players. Now, sideloading APKs sounds a bit geeky and technical, but it really isn't. As long as you choose a reputable site to get your APKs from, you are unlikely to run into any trouble. Now, obviously, DAPs don't have SIM cards in them, so you are limited to Wi-Fi streaming, of course. Most of them will, however, allow you to offline your streaming music, so you can load up on all your Spotify and Tidal playlists onto those huge capacity SD cards before you set off on your travels. Another reason I've highlighted, I think, is important to a lot of us old school beard strokey audiophiles, because whilst phones are great, they are a huge source of distraction, aren't they? And by only allowing you to listen to music, DAPs offer a layer of insulation from distracting notifications. I love just focusing on the music using my DAP rather than constantly feeling the need to check for Twitter notifications, Instagram, all that kind of stuff associated with the modern world. It's also great to just plug in and tune out when I need to focus on work, or at bedtime when I'm trying to drift off to sleep. So look, there are many benefits of DAPs, but there are, of course, downsides. Now, many high-end DAPs are chunky and heavy, and this one is no exception. Look at the size of it compared to my phone. And of course, they are another thing to have to lug around with you. Now, you do, of course, get small and light portable DAPs, but they tend to be of much lower quality than something like the M11 Plus. All that dedicated audio circuitry that's packed inside a DAP along with a decent battery to power it all, adds a great deal of bulk. Now, if you do want a recommendation for a smaller, more manageable DAP that still sounds fabulous, I'd steer you towards the Shanling M3X, which I used to have actually before I got the M11 Plus. It's small and light while still having a slick Android interface. There's no denying though that most of the time it's much more convenient to just grab your phone and rely on that as a portable music player. Now, we can't ignore the fact that DAPs, certainly good quality DAPs like the Fiio, are expensive. So this M11 Plus currently retails for £600 here in the UK, and for me anyway, that's the absolute limit that I would consider paying for a DAP. However, if you are feeling particularly wealthy, you can spend even more on models from the likes of Fiio themselves, along with Hibi, Shanling, and also most notably Estelle and Kern, which has some models on sale for in excess of $2,000, £2,000. To me, that's just insane. Now, you do get much cheaper models, although I would suggest that anything that costs less than about $200, $300 probably won't sound much better than your phone. The other option is to go down the second-hand or vintage DAP route, particularly if you can do without streaming capabilities. Now, if you trawl eBay or similar sites, you'll find many great models, including old iPods and Sony devices for much less money. If you're after an iPod Classic, I'd recommend the 5.5 generation iPod Classic. This is one of those, and it's the 80 gig model. You can of course mod these to add flash storage and renew the batteries, and you know, there are whole channels which are dedicated to showing you how to do all that. But you can pick one of these up fairly cheap. This one's in fantastic condition actually for its age. But yeah, you can get value for money buying second-hand, buying vintage, although obviously you're trading that against functionality and reliability. So the other thing to mention is watch out for battery life, which can be pretty poor on some DAPs. Now, thankfully, the M11 Plus here offers 12 to 13 hours of playback using the 3.5mm connection. A little bit less if you go balanced, because obviously then you're using both the DACs and more amplification, so the battery life goes down. But some DAPs do struggle to make it past 8 hours, which for me is not long enough. Finally, some DAPs don't have the horsepower to run an Android interface properly, resulting in a really laggy and glitchy experience, which is so jarring, especially when you're coming from something like a modern Android smartphone or an iPhone, which are silky smooth. And also remember, most Android DAPs run old versions of Android. The M11 Plus, which is, you know, one of the newer models, runs Android 10, the latest Android being Android 13, which has just been released. Now, this is unlikely to ever be updated beyond Android 10, and therefore it leads to concerns about how long streaming apps will continue to be supported for. I think DAPs definitely do still have a place in most audiophile setups, just simply based on the fact that they sound so much better than phones. Now, whether they sound better than phones hooked up to dedicated DACs and amps, that's a question for another video, not for today. But if you want a luxurious all-in-one solution to enjoy your offline files as well as your streaming services, then I think you will enjoy the experience of a DAP. There is just something charming and old school about using a device just for one purpose. So that's why I bought and continue to use a DAP. But let me know what you guys think. Drop a comment below. You know, I always love reading and responding to your comments. And yeah, watch out for another video coming up very soon.